Okay, people, we're going to talk about CSS animation, having multiple animations, and how to use a mix-in SCSS. Okay, so I came across some Facebook group that I'm in, some coding group. Somebody's asking how to do this little, you see my moving spheres up here. It was something similar to this, but they were like asking, is there a library to make things like this? And I looked at it and I said, I can make that in CSS animation. It's pretty easy. There's just 3 spheres that move. This isn't exactly what they had in mind, and this isn't exactly what they did, but it was just, the point was I wanted to try to recreate, or at least in theory, like what was going on. I saw 3 spheres that move. I'm like, I can do that. So let's figure out what we did here. I'm going to show you what I did, and we're also going to talk about, like I said, shortening up the code by using mixins in Sass or SCSS. So take a look at the HTML first. 3 divs, nothing in them, right? Div with the header and, or I should say an H1 and an H3 with some text. Okay, so pretty straightforward HTML there. And then, so this is, okay, so this was the CSS for the first one of the sphere classes, right? Yes, they're called sun. Okay, no big deal. Don't worry about that. It's just a name. So you had the back. You can see I've got a yellow, orange, and red. So there's the red one, red, and had the opacity so that you can still see the text. You know, some part of that is maybe too thick, and this isn't perfect. Okay, but you get the idea. Position absolute. It's needed because all those classes are, I mean, divs are on top of each other, or they would be, they're blocks, so they would be one underneath each other, and we want them all to be on the same plane, so they're going to be absolute. When you do absolute, then you can give it position at top and left. Negative 1050 moves it to the right, negative 300 moves it up, right? Gave it a width to make the sphere very big, because I just really wanted the curve part. I didn't want to see the whole sphere. And the height, 1200 pixels. Again, that's just to make it, we only wanted to see a very wide or small sector of that, the edge of the sphere. Border radius of 50. So it's a sphere because it's border radius 50, right? Otherwise it would be a box. It's a div, right? So then here's the animation part. You make a name for your animation. You tell it, there's a bunch of different attributes or properties for the animations. First, we're going to define the animation elsewhere, and it's going to be called sunrise. Or this, for some reason I had sunrise too, I don't know. It's just a name, just what you're going to call it. And you can change how long it takes. So for instance, it's set up to move around the screen in 1 second. Timing function linear, so you can make it speed up at the beginning, slow down at the beginning, slow down at the end, or little combinations of both. But linear just means it goes the same speed all the way through the animation. Delay animation means it won't start animating for whatever amount you put in there. Animation iteration count means if you put it to 1, it'll do its animation and then stop. But infinite means it will loop. Okay, so I had this basic bunch of CSS here, and I did the same thing 3 times with changing some of the positions, some of the duration, just to make it a little more random. Change the duration and the time and delay. Change the color. Okay, so I noticed that at least half this though was going to be exactly the same. That's when I realized I remember doing mix-ins. Okay, so the format for a mix-in in SCSS. First, before we tell you what the format, what is it? A mix-in is, it's really basically a lot like a JavaScript function, where it's almost like, instead of saying, here we're saying at mix-in, if it were a JavaScript function, right, you would say function, this would be called function, and then the name of the function, here, moving sphere, right? So very similar in that respect. And then you have attributes that can be changed, or arguments if it were a function, right? So then when I call this mix-in later, the moving sphere mix-in later on in the code, I give it arguments. So these were the ones that were different in each one. You see I have, what, like 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different properties. But I noticed that only 5 of them actually change. So rather than retyping all of that every time, we did it this way, and we'll just be able to change just the few that actually change. Okay, so how does that work? So like I said, you define it just like you define a function, and you see here, so here's the arguments, and then in the actual code, it's just like, again, it's just like a function. Wherever you see this string or color or $ color, whatever you put in here, give it as an argument, it will fill in here, $ color. Where you give it as $, delay, down here, it will fill it in with whatever $, delay when you call it. And so here's the example, the first one. Instead of having to type all this in 3 times, I just say, here's it at mixin, and here's how we include it in the, here's how we use it. We say include the name of the mixin, because you could have more than one mixin. You could have for different things on your page. So we made a function or a mixin called moving sphere, and then we're going to include it. Which one? Moving sphere. We're going to give it, these are the arguments that we could give it, and here's the arguments that I in fact gave it. So you can see that the red, whoa, code pen, settle down. Here's the red color, red, top minus 1050, left minus 300, delay 1 second, duration 10 seconds. You can see that I did for my three different divs. Remember we had sun, sun2, sun3, right? So instead of typing all that stuff 3 times and having to change it, I just do the include and change and give it the arguments for the pieces that I actually want to change. A red one, an orange one, a yellow one. They all start at the height. That's what keeps it only coming down partially off the page. Okay, the left is what makes them not be on top of each other, being just one stacked group of circles. It makes them side by side or spaced apart. This was the duration, and then this was the delay, or was it the other way around? Delay, then duration. Because they would, if you had them, didn't put the delay on them, they would all start at the same time, and they would just look like they're all bouncing the same time up and down. I wanted it to be a little more random looking, so I gave them a different delay and a different amount of time to do the animation. So you can see it saves a whole lot of typing, a whole lot of code, and I think more readable, because if you say, oh, these are all, instead of looking, if you had to look at somebody else's code and you saw this in 3 different places, you can't tell right away that they're all exactly the same thing with just a couple of variations. But if you look at somebody's code and you see these 3 things right here, you say, oh, these are clearly, he did the same thing, but just modified a couple little things. Okay? Or even if it's your own code and you go back and look, you know, a month later or 2 months later, you say, oh, how did I do that? Oh, here, I remember. Okay, yeah, just these 3 things, just modified a couple things. So, in terms of the animation name, Sunrise 2, okay? That's where you're going to define the actual movement of your animation. We're doing what they call a Keyframe Animation Css. So, again, it looks, the way you define it is very similar to a function, right? So this would be the declaring a function kind of thing, and then the name of the function, but we're calling at keyframes, calling keyframes is like the type of animation. So animation name, it's an animation with this name, keyframe animation called Sunrise 2. And the way it works is you can do, keyframes means they show different spots in the animation. So 0% is the beginning, 100% is the end of your animation. So you can set different points along the way. I happen to have it doing different things, hitting different points on its path at different stages through the animation. So halfway through it's at a certain spot, quarter of the way through, 3/4 of the way through, it hits different spots. So they don't just go straight up and down. If it had just 0 and the 100, you notice that they're the same. So they start at the top and bottom. Transform, let me back up a second. Transform and translate, CSS property that does, basically moves an object on the page, and it's the right and top. The pixels there, the 0 pixels is saying transform and translate 0 pixels to the right and 0 pixels down. Now obviously that doesn't do anything, but it just gives me a starting point for the animation. It has to start somewhere, okay? So the first thing I'm doing is saying transform, and translate is just a kind of transformation. Translate move just means move it left and right, or left, right, up and down. There's other ones like rotate and skew and things like that are all kinds of transforms. Mine are just going in a line, so it's just translating. So it's starting here at 0, 0, and it's moving quarter of the way through my animation to 150 pixels to the right and 50 pixels down. Then halfway through the animation, it's moving again from there, from its original spot to here. It's not, this one is, the 300 pixels is not in relation to this 150. It's in relation to its original spot, okay? So then 3/4 of the way through, it's going back to the same spot it was over here at 25%, and ultimately it returns back to it was. Because I have it on a loop, I wanted to end where it started so you don't see it jump, okay? So if you look at what's going on here, 150, 50, 310. Basically it's starting like, just watch my cursor. It's starting here, going down to the right, up, back. So it's sort of like just bouncing like a V, I guess, basically. But since they are all slightly different variations in my mix here with the duration and the time it takes, it looks a little more random than that. Plus they start in different spots. So you can look a little more about animations. There's a lot of different things you could do here besides transform and translate. You could put any of these CSS properties in here really, and it just changes. It'll change them as it hits your different amount of time through your animation. So plenty to look up there, but that's pretty much how it works. The mixin thing I thought was pretty cool. See, so this I just cut. So this, I don't need this here anymore. That was just, I put that back in so I could show you what I did. So define it once in the mixin, give it the properties that you're going to fill in, and then define them down here with that same basically variable, color, color, top, top, left, left, etc. And then when you call it, it's a lot less to write. You only have to write that code once, and then it's much easier to tell what you actually changed or what you didn't change or what needs to be changed. And again, we only need to define the animation once. I had animated more than one animation also. I'm not sure why that was. I forget, to be perfectly honest. But so we can use just the one animation, the one mixin, call it 3 times. Saves a whole lot of typing. That is it for this video. I hope that is helpful. Alright, see you next time.